how to actively listen and emotionally support other people. Let's get right into this. So I have basically a definition of what active listening is, and on the board I have a bunch of do's and don'ts, and I'm going to be explaining each one of these one by one. So I'm going to start off by reading what I really mean by active listening. So active listening is a communication skill that involves paying full attention to what someone is saying, showing interest, and providing verbal and non-verbal feedback to the speaker. It requires a conscious effort, that's really big, a conscious effort to understand the speaker's message, both verbal and nonverbal, and to respond thoughtfully rather than simply waiting for one's turn to speak. That's also very big. I'll be talking about that. The goal of active listening is to build rapport, promote mutual understanding, and facilitate effective communication. So there's a few points there that I just want to elaborate on a little bit more. The first is active listening, the actual word active. And this implies that there is a conscious effort. There's something that you're actually doing to understand what the other person is saying. See, most listening is passive listening. Right now you might be passively listening to this, which is okay. There's nothing good or bad with passive listening. But the thing is there are crucial moments when you are relating to people where you need to actively listen and emotionally support them. And I also want to emphasize the fact that this is a communication skill. And like any skill, this actually has to be actively worked on. You actually have to have some interest in developing this skill. It's not like you just automatically know how to do it. Actually, it's quite the opposite. You automatically don't know how to do it because it's a skill that needs to be worked on. So conscious effort is incredibly necessary for active listening because the whole active component of it, which I'll be explaining very shortly, I'll go into more depth about what I mean by that. This actually requires you to know that you are actively listening, which is a distinct shift from how we usually listen. How we usually listen is very passive. We don't really care. We're not very engaged. We're kind of absorbed in our own world, in our own thoughts, in our own feelings, what we want, what we need, what we whatever think. Really, we're absorbed in ourselves instead of really caring for and deeply attempting to understand the person that we are talking to. And passive listening is actually okay in, a lot of conversations, but you need to know when to actively listen and when to passively listen. Sometimes passive listening is very important. Actually, in a lot of casual, friendly conversations, passive listening is 100% okay, and it actually adds to the flow of the conversation, where active listening changes the flow of the conversation. When you begin to actively listen, there is a distinct shift that happens in the communication. For example, instead of waiting to speak, like when we passively listen, we are actually waiting to speak. That's a quality of passively listening. We're not engaged in the actual sensory experience of listening. We are instead just sort of letting the words come in. We're having a very shallow understanding of what they're really trying to tell us. We're really just getting it at the surface. And we are really then just saying the first thing that comes in our mind back to them. We are not really focused on their needs. We're focused on what we want, which is, I want to speak. Unconsciously, we want to speak. We are just simply waiting for our turn to talk, and we're not engaging in listening. So a massive aspect of actively listening, probably the largest, is attention. And this is very subtle, actually. When you are giving another person your attention, I want you to notice how easily your attention can wander. For example, if you're talking to someone over dinner, you can just pick up your glass of whatever, let's say water, to drink it. And the moment you have drank that water, the actual sense of being connected to that person has slightly diminished because your attention has now been diverted to the water. You're no longer connecting with them. You are now absorbed in something that you want. You're absorbed in your own needs. You're absorbed in drinking water instead of connecting with the other person. And there's nothing wrong with stopping to drink water, especially if you're thirsty. But the thing is when we are attempting to actively listen and emotionally support another person, this is an inappropriate behavior. This is simply pulling us away from what we are attempting to do, which is actively listen and emotionally support. So I want to emphasize the importance of basically being aware of where your awareness is actually going, being aware of where your attention is going. And I want you to notice that the more you give someone your attention in a conversation, the deeper the sense of connection becomes. And the more you sort of pour your energy and attention into the conversation, the deeper the sense of flow becomes with the conversation. It starts to happen naturally. It starts to happen effortlessly. And you actually begin to develop more rapport and more of a mutual understanding for each other. And I want to emphasize the importance of, I've been emphasizing the importance of a lot of things already, but I want to talk about the importance of knowing when to actively listen and when to passively listen, because passive listening, like I said, is completely okay. And in a lot of friendly conversations, we can just passively listen because there's no deep sort of emotional significance to everything that we're saying. But when someone's emotional tone has changed, and when the meaning of what they're saying has changed, we might notice that this is a good time to stop caring about what we want and really tune in to the person that we're talking to. So really, I want you to pay attention to the overall emotional tone that they have, their body language, the actual tone of their voice, things like that, facial expression, things like that, and the meaning of what they're saying. So when these change to something, I guess, let's say maybe anything that is demanding of our attention. Let's say someone becomes sad or concerned with something or a little bit confused about something in their life, and we can detect it, and what they're saying is moving in that direction. The meaning of the words that they're saying is moving in that direction. We can then shift from passively listening to actively listening. So a good example of passively listening, and when it works in a conversation, is let's say we're talking about, I don't know, like sports or something, and someone is just saying like, "Oh, have you seen the game?" And you're like, "Yeah, I've seen the game." See, we don't need to be so actively engaged in really what they just said, because it's just a fairly basic question. There's no real deep emotional significance to it. It's just a fairly basic question. Whereas when someone is saying like, "Hey man, like I need some help in my career," or something like, "Oh, I need some more clarity in my career. Can you help me? Can I talk to you?" Now, obviously, the entire way that you relate to them has to change. You have to show more empathy, more attention, validate their concerns, actually be curious, patient, open-minded. See, now you have to do a lot of these things on the board rather than a lot of a lot of these things. So I'm going to get into a lot of these qualities, and really I want to once again emphasize the importance, my God, about how this is actually a skill. Everything that you see on the board here is something that has to be actively worked on. This is a skill to develop. It's not like it's something you already know or already understand. I want you to wipe away every belief that you currently have about any of this and just listen to this and try and see this all with fresh eyes again, so that you can begin to, I guess, get something new out of this video. So attention is massive. Attention involves giving the speaker your full attention, really giving them your full presence, avoiding distractions, putting away your phone, and basically noticing anything that can make your focus sort of drift off, and just avoiding stuff like that. So instead of drinking water, like I was saying, you just don't do that. you give them your attention. Instead of checking your phone, you don't do that. You give them your attention. Instead of looking at, let's say, the cute girl or cute guy walking by, you don't do that. You give them your attention. Also, this involves avoiding interrupting the person when they're talking. When you are actively listening, no longer are you waiting to speak or interrupting. You are sitting there and you're fully engaged in the emotions that the person is displaying. You're fully engaged in the meaning that they are trying to convey to you. And not only that, but you are also watching your urge to speak. And this is a difficult one. This is a very interesting one. On this side of the board, on the don't, I'm going to get back to this later, but I have in quotes, wait to speak. So there's a distinct shift between actively listening and waiting to speak. Most of the time when we are quote unquote listening, we're waiting to speak. We are not actually engaged in listening. We want to instead assert ourselves into the conversation a lot of the time. I'm not saying all the time, but that is a very sort of common thing amongst people where we, instead of wanting to care for the other's needs and what they want and support them, we want that for ourselves, which there's nothing wrong with wanting that for ourselves. It's just that sometimes this can be inappropriate, especially in a time where we need to actively listen and emotionally support another human being. And another really important thing is, of course, paying attention to what they're verbally saying and non-verbally saying. So like I said, facial expression, body language. You can see if they're tense anywhere. You can see where their eyes are going, if they look kind of worried, stuttering, things like this. So verbal and non-verbal are both very important. I have talked about attention enough. It's very important to actually be aware of things that can distract you and actually block you from giving them your full attention, because it's easy to see all this stuff and think that, like, yeah, I know how to listen, I know how to communicate, I know how to be empathetic and all this stuff, but actually within each and every one of us, we have a lot of blocks to really letting these abilities fully blossom and fully flower. And it's important to actually recognize that we have a lot of these tendencies in us that actually screw up our ability to connect with people, and that really we suck at connecting with people. It's very important to notice that connection and emotionally supporting people, listening, these are something that we need to work on actively. I've said this enough now in this video, but unless you have actually intentionally decided to develop this skill, odds are you're probably not very good at it. And I want you to be honest with yourself right now about whether or not you have intentionally decided to cultivate these abilities. And if you haven't, you probably don't really have them. And if you do, probably a very shallow degree of development and competency within them. Is competency even a word? You're probably fairly incompetent at a lot of this fairly often. And really, a lot of this stuff really takes control of you. And there's no judgment with that. There's no like shaming. I'm not like shaming you for it. That's not my point. My point is that we just have to be very honest and clear to ourselves about whether or not we have actually intentionally decided to develop these qualities within ourselves. And it is a very active process that you need to invest in. You need to invest time, energy, and attention into this in order to actually develop them. So moving on, we'll go to empathy. So showing empathy involves trying to understand the speaker's feelings, thoughts, and their experiences. And this can be done by really, of course, paying attention to them. But a big one is actually asking open-ended questions and reflecting on the things that they say and what they feel, and really trying to step into their shoes, really trying to get the emotion that they're feeling, really trying to understand the sort of meaning behind what they're saying, and really asking questions, which I'm going to be talking about very shortly. No, I'll do it now. We'll go back. So open-ended questions, this involves asking something like, what happened next? Or how does that make you feel? Or is this really what you want? And I guess things related to just opening the other person up. Asking them a question that involves getting them to open up mentally and emotionally. This is also a skill. Question asking is something that you need to develop. A lot of people struggle with being able to ask high quality questions. And actually, I'm going to make a separate video on how to ask questions because this is something I'm very good at. Really, you should be asking yourself, how do I ask good questions? That's a fantastic question. What are the blocks to asking good questions? Really, questioning is something that ideally you would want to do every day. If you can generate 20 good questions a day, that is a pretty good habit to get into. Really, we don't question enough. It's important to ask open-ended questions that simultaneously validate the person that you're talking to. So you don't want to question them in a way that undermines them, but you want to question them in a way that actually validates their feelings and makes them feel as though their concerns are valid, their feelings are important, their opinion is important, even if you don't fully understand them. So the point of asking questions is because you don't fully understand. It's because you don't know something. And that's okay. And really, if you can ask questions in a way that is simultaneously validating, this is a very good skill to develop. And this can be done not only by the actual sort of linguistic component of asking questions, like the verbal content, but the emotional tone behind it, having a sense of warmth and softness to your voice, and actually just displaying genuine interest in what they're saying. And also a little bit of reassurance that, just telling them that, what they feel is totally valid and that, it's okay to basically be concerned about what they're concerned about or feel the way that they're feeling. And another really important one is nonverbal feedback. So we'll move on to nonverbal feedback. Really, this, of course, involves eye contact, basically body language, things like that, facial expressions, and this is all very important because it actually shows that you are engaged in the conversation. You're actually engaged in the connection. And when you are open, your body's not tense. You're actually listening. You're in your senses. You're actually in your feelings. You're in your listening. You're really just in your senses. You're touching them on the shoulder or something like that when it's appropriate. When you are displaying these behaviors, it actually increases the sense of connection that you can feel towards the other person. And you can really, as you begin to talk, feel the sense of sort of connection and the sort of flow of energy between you and another person. If you're connecting to them deep enough and you're actually emotionally open enough, your body's open enough, your body's not tense, you can begin to feel the sort of flow of energy between you and the other person. And really, this can really begin to cultivate a deeper sense of mutual understanding. So you can't really fake nonverbal feedback, and if you can, the other person at some level will actually begin to sense that it's inauthentic. They will actually begin to sense that you don't really care, and the whole situation will actually kind of seem off. Whereas when you are genuinely curious, you're open-minded, you're patient, you're actually there with them, you're present, they can actually feel this off of you, and it makes them want to connect with you on a deeper level and actually continuously open up to you, which is very important, of course, for developing high-quality relationships with people. Really, the whole point of this is to improve relational skills. And not only that, but a lot of this stuff, a lot of these qualities are just very important for success in life, or feeling good, feeling healthy, being psychologically well. These are just a lot of very healthy qualities to develop within yourself. They really lead to just better mental health and overall emotional well-being. So moving on, we did nonverbal feedback. We'll move on to being present. So this involves actually, this is kind of related to attention. This involves actually focusing on the speaker and really moving away from your own thoughts and your own needs and preferences, and basically anything that can distract you. This involves remaining conscious in the present moment, remaining aware in the present moment, instead of being kind of dull, lost in your own thoughts, lost in your own world, kind of hypnotized by the things you want and need. You actually kind of break out of that, and you are creating a sense of connection to the here and now. Another big point that I don't actually have written on the board, but it's the importance of a safe and supportive environment. So basically, safety and feeling supported is absolutely necessary for opening up emotionally and growth overall. If we do not feel safe and supported, we cannot actually open up, actively listen. We can't establish the deep connections that we want with people. It'll just simply fail. So obviously, doing this stuff in the right overall environment is pretty big. If it's a very loud environment, you probably can't have a more therapeutic conversation with someone. It's going to be definitely a lot harder if you are, let's say, standing next to the speaker at a concert to have a therapeutic conversation with someone. Whereas if you're in a, let's say, cafe having some tea with them, that's a little bit, a lot easier to actually have the conversation with them. And it needs to be in a place where, depending on the conversation, you can be in private, just the two of you. Or whatever it is, it really depends on what's being said and the whole emotional tone and the whole energy of the situation. But take into account environmental factors. It's going to be very hard to do this stuff if you aren't actually in the proper setting. If you're in a very unsafe environment that's unstable, it's kind of chaotic, things are changing, there's dogs barking, music blaring, people screaming, sirens going off, cars honking. You can't really do it in an environment like that. It's a lot harder. Whereas if it's quiet, stable, steady, warm, kind of private, very accepting, loving, supportive, it's a lot easier to establish these kinds of connections in that environment rather than the former environment. What else do we have here? I guess we have respect next. So respect involves, really, if you agree or disagree with them, this doesn't matter. This involves really, it's close to validating what they're saying. So let's say you agree with them or disagree with them. It doesn't even matter. You actually show a sense of basically validation for them. This is a part of the essence of respect. It has a lot to do with not imposing your beliefs onto the other person. So this don't impose your beliefs. This is something that happens quite often whenever people need, let's say, help with something. They need some advice, they need some clarity, or they need emotional support. A lot of people, instead of asking them open-ended questions, instead of being actually curious about them, instead of being patient and open-minded and present and engaged in the conversation, they instead impose what they think and what they feel and what they believe onto the other person as though this is helpful. And really it's not at all, because this has nothing to do with what they need and what they want and what they feel. And when we're trying to actively listen and emotionally support someone, what's more important is them, than our preferences in that moment. We have to actually put our own beliefs and our own agenda and our own values aside. Because we have a lot of beliefs about how people should act, or what people should do, or who people should vote for, or where people should go to school, and what they should study, and what's a waste of time, and what isn't a waste of time, and what's true, and what's false, and what's right, and what's wrong. And all of that, basically, you have to throw that very far away, as if it never even existed, just completely ignore that, and actually focus more on, what does this person want? What does this person need? What does this person feel? What does this person care about? What's important to them? What do they value? What are their beliefs? What are their biases? What are their preferences? What do they need to live and be healthy and be well? This is the kind of stuff you have to care about in order to actually add value to the other person and really establish a sense of connection and care and just really just establish a good relationship with them. And really, this is not something you do once or twice. This is something you ongoingly do. It's not like something, I did it, oh man, but I actively listened and I emotionally supported you once already today. Can't I just get what I want now? Like, this is the wrong attitude to have. This is actually really who you become. You have to craft yourself into the person who can be selfless, really, instead of constantly trying to absorb value from everyone around you like a leech. You actually have to provide value. You have to provide, you have to give out value like it's nothing. Like you have so much to give and you can just give it out constantly. Like you have to actually make yourself an abundant human being and actually develop these skills and then provide value through these skills. You know, something like humor or charisma as well are actually skills. These are social skills that people like, and it adds value. It's interesting to think about it like that validating someone or showing empathy or giving someone your attention, these are ways of contributing value to that person, and people like it when people give them valuable stuff. People intuitively sense that when you give them your attention, this is valuable, especially if they want it. But whenever you try and talk to someone, if they're half there, half not there, you can feel this off them very, very quickly. You kind of sense there's something up, and you don't really want to talk to them. You don't really want to engage in a conversation with them. Whereas when you can really sense that they're fully there and they're actually giving you your undivided attention, now you can actually have a more deeper conversation that has a sense of flow and momentum to it. So a lot of this stuff is designed really to add value to the person that you're talking to so that you can establish connection. Whereas this stuff has a lot more to do with you just selfishly absorbing from the conversation or from the overall interaction. This stuff has a lot to do with just getting the things that you want. And really, this sort of selfish behavior, and I don't mean the word selfish in like a moral sense as though it's bad, I just mean it's more geared towards what you want, what you need. Not in the sense that it's like bad or it shouldn't ever be done. I mean it in the sense that it's just geared towards yourself and not the other person. So this stuff is designed more so, or I'm not going to say the word designed, but this stuff is more about extracting value, whereas this is more about actually giving out value. And there's nothing wrong with wanting value from other people. We all want it, and it's perfectly fine. The thing is that when it's time to actively listen and emotionally support people, the things that you do to extract value from people are inappropriate and not helpful. And actually, when you are able to add value to other people, they naturally want to give you value back because they like you, they care about you, you help them, and a lot of people will want to help you back. They'll actually want to give you something in return. They'll actually begin to care about you because you actually care about them and can give them so much, and you can consistently give them things that they want. You can consistently make them laugh. You can consistently listen to them well. You can consistently provide good verbal and nonverbal feedback. You can consistently be present with them. You can consistently be caring and empathetic and curious and give them your attention. So naturally, they actually want to be with you and give you something back. They want to actually care about you. Whereas if you're consistently avoiding being distracted, imposing your beliefs, invalidating them, judging them, closing down to them, passively listening, and just waiting to speak and blurt out whatever you want to say, I mean, yeah, like you're going to screw up the whole interaction with them, because instead of actually caring, you're more just acting in a more selfish way, and basically in a way that you're just trying to extract value as much as you can, as fast as you can. Which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with, but it'll definitely screw up the interaction. You won't have the deeper connection that really we're looking for. So where was I? I guess I was at open-mindedness now. I just did respect. I'm going to open-mindedness. This basically has a lot to do with entering the interaction without preconceived beliefs and judgments. So this is like wiping your mind clean, okay? Because this is very difficult for people to do, but we come into situations with our whole belief system just sort of active and ready. And when we hear something that is sort of not in harmony with our belief system, it's easy to avoid, dismiss, distract, judge, invalidate. This begins to happen naturally, really. We begin to interrupt or wait to speak, passively listen, close down. It's all kind of just begins to naturally happen the second we hear something that we just disagree with strongly. It kind of repels us. And it's important to just be open and just have a deep degree of mental flexibility so that regardless of who we're talking to, we can actually still feel for them, hear what they say, understand what they want, understand what their preferences are, their beliefs, etc., 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 and actually still provide that emotional support. Instead of being a total asshole and just imposing our beliefs onto them and then just moving on with our day as if like we're right, they're wrong, I'm smart, you're stupid, blah, blah, blah. Instead of that, a significantly more intelligent approach is actually opening up your mind to someone else's ideas, someone else's beliefs, someone else's worldview, someone else's interpretation, someone else's feelings. Begin to get curious about why they are the way they are, ask them questions. You actually begin to develop more understanding through this kind of process rather than just caring about your beliefs and imposing your beliefs onto a situation. And my God, do we ever impose our beliefs onto basically every situation. This is really one of the best things that we do. We are fantastic at just imposing our beliefs, interpretations, preferences, biases onto people, places, things, and then just acting like we're not even doing it, and then acting like we're just correct. So yeah, it's important to notice when you close down as well. It's important to actually become aware of when you're closing down, when your body's getting tense, when you can feel a sense of mental tension with the other person based on what they're saying, and then just open up anyway. Like actually have the courage to just open up. Instead of being scared and closing down and wanting to kind of attack them or run away or avoid the situation or distract yourself, actually be courageous enough and selfless enough to open up, just open up to it. Have the mental flexibility to open up to it. And you don't actually have to completely believe what they're saying, but try and find at least a little bit of validity in what they're saying and why they might think that way. And when I say why they might think that way, actually come up with a reason that isn't insulting. So like, oh, they think that way because they're stupid. No, actually try and come up with a reason that makes actual sense and isn't completely idiotic and based off basically your biases, beliefs, preferences, your judgments. Actually come to realize that people have beliefs, not because they're stupid, but because there's actually some value in every single belief system that they can intuitively sense is there. Even though they might have some, factual errors or stuff that's blatantly incorrect, it's still important to recognize that people are religious for a good reason. People are conservative for a good reason. People are liberal for a good reason. People do this for a good reason. People do that for a good reason. It's not because they're just stupid. It's actually because there's some value there that they are attached to or they're trying to get. So it's important to actually be open and look for solid reasons for why people are the way they are that don't have to do with your judgments and projections. Moving on to patience. This involves allowing the speaker to express themselves without interruption or pressure to hurry. It's fairly simple. So when they're talking, don't tell them to hurry up or spit it out. Just sit back, chill out, relax, chill out, relax. Like untense your body, sit down in a chair. Just sit back and relax. Just have a normal conversation and kind of let it flow naturally. Try and just be open to what's happening. Don't put any pressure on them to, spit it out or anything like that. Let them sort of move at the pace at which they are actually comfortable with. Because remember, it's not about you, it's about them when you're actively listening and emotionally supporting. And this is a very, very important skill for intimate relationships, friendships, business, dealing with customers, dealing with employers, just dealing with people. People have concerns, worries, anxieties, fears, things like that. And if you can actually emotionally support people, they will really appreciate it. Like if you can emotionally support your boss at work sometimes, they will see you as more valuable and treat you with more respect. They'll see you as more competent. They'll see you as more understanding and more intelligent. They'll actually care for you more. That you can emotionally support your girlfriend or boyfriend, your friend, your neighbor. This changes the whole relationship. This changes really everything. They will actually begin to like you a lot more and then want to add value to you as well, because you're showering them with value. If you, for the most part, shower people with value, they will want to give you stuff in return. If you're consistently giving people so much, they will naturally want to give you something in return. Where was I? Patience. Now I'm at curiosity. So active listeners are curious and ask questions and are eager to learn more about the speaker's experiences and perspectives. So this has a lot to do with asking open-ended questions. These kind of go together. Actually caring, but also wanting to understand. It's the actual sort of implicit feeling of wanting to understand and wanting to know and wanting to get clear about what's going on inside of them, what they believe, feel, value, think, etc. Moving on, I have, I'll go back to actively listen, but I have engagement. I'm here now, engagement. I'm going back to actively listen soon. So basically this has a lot to do with reflecting on what is being said and really offering feedback when it's necessary, or of course has a lot to do with asking questions as well. So when you are actively engaging in the conversation, this has a lot to do with you intentionally and consciously interacting really, rather than passively and sort of half-assing the interaction. And a lot of our interactions are half-assed. This has a lot to do with intentionally trying to construct a conversation that flows and is based off mutual understanding and really love, regardless of whether you guys agree with each other or not. I know, right? I know that would be pretty good if we could do that as a species. So actively engaging really involves participating in the conversation, reflecting on what's being said, and offering feedback. And next we have focus. This has a lot to do with attention, but this is about maintaining focus on the conversation rather than allowing your thoughts or any distractions to interfere with your attention. This has a lot to do with attention as well, but I want you to notice that your focus / attention, basically kind of using them interchangeably here, they're easily hooked by a thought that you have, by a drink that you're drinking, by a person who's walking by a loud noise. So let's say you're sitting down at a coffee shop drinking some coffee with a person. They're opening up to you. When you go to drink your coffee, your attention is diverted. It's on the picking up the cup of coffee, and then it's on the taste of the coffee rather than their emotions and their feelings and the meaning of what they're saying. And if you're sensitive enough to the connection and the overall sense of being connected to them, when your attention begins to go somewhere else, the sense of connection begins to weaken, like I said earlier. So actively listen. This is a bit interesting. So I have this book here, and it goes. This is my last point as well. Read Active Listening by Carl Rogers. I've got this book here. You can buy it off Amazon. I don't even know how much it is. It might be like $9 or something. Nine Canadian bucks. I'm not really sure. So it's about 25 pages. It's 25 pages. Like it's a very easy read, okay? It's super simple. You would be an incredibly intelligent person to purchase this book right now, because this is basically how active listening works and all of the blocks to active listening. And this will give you a solid understanding of how to actually actively listen, and it'll give you a deeper ability to emotionally support people. So actively listening involves actually engaging with the words that they're saying, with the tone of their voice. Basically, you want to focus on their whole being. You don't want to focus just on the verbal feedback. You want to focus on how much it means to them. Are they angry about it? Are they sad about it? Are they confused about it? Are they happy about it? Are they jealous about it? Are they up, down, left, right? However it is. You want to really get the emotional tone and the meaning behind what they're saying, and you do not want to wait to speak or passively listen. These are all the sort of antithesis of actively listening. When, like I said, when we are typically engaging in conversations, we are just waiting to speak and waiting our turn to just, get our words out, rather than really caring about the other person. Actually create the sense of caring about them, like actually care. I know, right? You have to actually care. So when we are actively listening, we are not doing any of this. We are not getting distracted. We're not imposing our beliefs onto them or invalidating them or judging them. We're not avoiding the situation. We're not trying to get over there and, away from this, away from the person that is engaging with us. We're not closing down. We're not getting tense in our bodies, and we're not passively listening, and we're not waiting to speak. When we're actively listening, we are engaging in all of these qualities simultaneously. These are basically, this is a combination of qualities that all work together to create really the deepest possible connections and sense of mutual understanding that we can create as humans. And these are all qualities to be developed, and there's basically different degrees of development of all of these qualities. And if you can develop all these qualities to the highest possible degree, then you'll have a lot of the deepest connections. You'll be a master at connecting with people and understanding people, which is very important for your whole life. We are a very social species. When you go to work, there's people. When you go to the grocery store, there's people. When you're in traffic, there's people around you. Walk down the street, there's people. Your relationship, there's two people. And not only does this help you with understanding other people, but also understanding yourself. It increases your self-awareness, emotional well-being, things like that. It increases your overall intelligence as well. So basically, a lot of this stuff is extremely valuable, and you would be insanely wise to actually care about it and actively develop these qualities. And you would also be insanely wise to actually purchase the book Active Listening by Carl Rogers. That would be definitely a very smart move. And now, speaking of Carl Rogers, I'm going to just end off this video talking a little bit about who he is. So Carl Rogers, who is an influential American psychologist, was a strong advocate of active listening and developed the concept of client-centered therapy. In this approach, the therapist practices active listening by demonstrating empathy, genuineness, and unconditional positive regard towards the client. Rogers believed that by providing a supportive and non-judgmental environment, clients would feel heard, validated, and empowered to work through their emotional challenges. He argued that the therapeutic relationship based on active listening and empathy is crucial for the client's growth and self-exploration. Thus, active listening is an essential component of Carl Rogers' person-centered therapy and is still widely used in modern therapy and counseling practices. So not only is he just like some therapist psychologist dude, But he's written a lot of books. This guy is insanely intelligent. He's a very profound human, really. He has another great book called A Way of Being. I would definitely recommend checking that one out. But for the purpose of this video, I'd recommend just starting with active listening. You can even just do some basic research on him, look him up. But other than that, I have nothing left to say in this video. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And other than that, take it easy.